You're listening to The Tales We Tell, a podcast about spooky stories, unsolved mysteries, and local lore. I'm your host, Hannah Parch.
And I'm Katie.
Welcome back! After all of that chatting.
Well, we have, we hung out for a while together yesterday.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen each other for, over a week before then.
So we haven't recorded in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
And honestly, Jarek and I did not record last week because I forgot it was a flippin' holiday and I was out of town and Jarek stayed here. So we just weren't together on the weekend. Anyway, welcome back. I have a great episode for you.
I'm very excited. You were teasing it yesterday. You said nobody dies.
Yeah, I just realized some people do die, but it's not...
They're not important people.
It's not...
They're side characters.
Children do not die, I don't think.
That's always a winning episode for me.
Yeah, I don't think any children die.
We're going to get, halfway into the episode, and she's going to
be like, oh, crap.
Ooh, she's going to look at her next bullet point and be like, remember how I said...
Well, I'm looking...
technically, he's a child because he's 17, but...
I was looking at my notes. I was like, oh, the very first thing I'm about to tell you about is a ghost, essentially. So obviously someone had to die for that to happen. But we're going to go local lore. And
local to where?
Local to Eastern North Carolina.
Nice. So actual
local lore. And I'm going to open with a question for you.
I love when we start with questions.
It's kind of subjective.
Okay.
Katie, you specifically, how would you describe your feelings in regards to the train that rumbles through our little town?
Oh man, I have very mixed feelings on the train, and my feelings are very situational.
Okay. We should preface with Katie lives right next to the train tracks.
Sit on my front porch and watch them.
Yes.
Walk down the street and you're at the tracks. And it's not just a railroad crossing. No. It is a train yard.
Yes.
It is where they go block the road and stop there. And then they go back and you think they're going to open up the road, but really they're just slamming into other cars and they're just, linking up cars and ordering them. So there's a lot of back and forth and there's a lot of slamming.
Yeah. My favorite is when you can see the end of the train.
Oh,
it's one or two cars, and then they stop, and you're just stuck at the...
And then they start going backwards. They're like, no, just pull forward a little bit more, let us through, and then go backwards. But they don't care. They do not care about whoever is on the road.
The last time I was at your house, coming to your house, because I got stuck at the train, I considered very heavily parking on the side of the road where I was, and then just
jumping the train.
Yeah, jumping the tracks and but then I was like, well, I have stuff with me. I had my cooler or whatever. And I was like, I'm going to have to climb over a train thing. And that made me a little nervous. I'm like, I'll just wait a bit. And then
I told you about the guy that my dad and I were going to move up here visiting, and we were going to walk downtown to go get some lunch or some beers or whatever. And as we're walking downtown, of course, the train's blocking the road. So we're just standing there looking at the train.
Right.
And some guy starts climbing underneath the train.
No.
With his bicycle.
No.
And is trying to push his bike under the train, but the pedal got stuck kind of on the railing.
Oh my gosh.
And as he's halfway out from under it, still halfway under the train, trying to unstick his bike and pull it, the rest of the way over, train starts firing up.
Oh
and you just see it starts before it starts to actually move.
Yeah.
It kind of will rock back and forth a little bit, but you heard the engine firing up.
Oh my gosh.
And it was starting to just barely move, and I was about to scream at that guy, leave it, I'll give you my bike. I have a bike, you can have it, leave the bike.
Yeah.
Because 100% both my dad and I were convinced that we were about to watch a man die right in front of us.
Thankfully
he did get the bike unstuck and got the bike out from
Oh,
under
my
it.
gosh.
He got out from under the train
Priorities,
before
man.
it started actually moving. Like, when I say it started moving, it was more like it was starting to just creep.
Yeah. Oh,
But-
my gosh.
But yeah, it was like the pedal was kind of jammed in the rail, like in between the rail and the road.
Yeah.
And anytime you would try and like lift it, the handlebar was hitting the underside of the train. I was like,
Going under is the worst way to go through a train.
yeah. But it's easier than trying to lift the bike up and over in between the cars, I guess.
Is it easier though?
I don't know.
I
I
would say toss the bike. You're already making reckless choices.
Yeah, I'd be like,
Just throw
I
the
was,
bike and-
like I said, fully prepared to like go and grab him
Yeah.
and like tell him to leave the bike, that I would give him mine.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my
we've got a
gosh.
bike, you can have it, do not die.
Jeez. Oh, that's horrifying. Well, are
So,
there...
like I said, mixed feelings about
Yeah.
the train, because I have a lot of great memories of sitting on the porch talking with Shelton, like having a beer at the end of the day, and the sun's going down, the train is kind of going back and forth, and we're having a great conversation. Walker loves watching the train,
Okay.
and so like we'll walk down and watch the train go back and forth, and so we do what we, I have a lot of great memories there, and the train guys will always wave to Walker, and
Aw.
it's the sweetest thing. But then there's times like potentially tonight I'm on my way home and I'm like, all right, I'm tired, I want to be home,
Yeah.
I have to pee,
Yep.
I'm ready to be home, and the train's just there.
Just sitting there.
Or when Walker is so excited because Aunt Hannah and Aunt G are coming over to see him, and they're just not here yet because the train is in their way.
Stuck at the train.
Those are the bad times. So, mixed feelings on trains. Kind of enjoy being by the train, but also when we're at the Papa,
Which is
really
the
in-
cabin.
yeah. Walker calls the cabin the Papa.
It's clarified for everyone else.
You can clarify. Murder cabin.
Yes.
There's the murder cabin, which is the little cabin
Where
by
people get murdered.
yeah, by the creek, and then it's funny. Walker can say creek, and he can say caw caw, and he can say cluck cluck, and he can say all these hard K sounds, but the pow says boo,
Of course.
even though he can say moon, and mama, and all other M sounds. Cow says boo.
Of course.
Sorry, the pow says boo. He drinks out of a puh, and we love going to the Papa, which is the cabin. Anywho,
Anyway.
I really enjoy the quiet
Yes.
of the Papa.
The absence of a train.
Instead, we have the wind whistling and whipping because it is heckin' windy out there sometimes.
That sounds nice.
And the wind chimes are rocking and rolling.
Nice. Well, I'm going to tell you a story about a train. I'm actually going to tell you a couple stories about trains.
Ghost train?
No. Sorry. Well, no.
Well, maybe I need to do a follow-up to my ghost ship episode and do ghost trains.
Trains are really scary, by the way. Just in that they can't really stop easily, and
Trains are...
they will kill you.
Yeah, trains are terrifying in that manner.
Yes.
Like I mentioned, the guy with the bicycle. I didn't even tell you the story about the time that I was driving home, thankfully in the opposite direction, and there was a police cruiser blocking the road right at the intersection, and I was kind of like turning,
Oh my gosh.
and I was like, I rolled down my window. I was like, my house is the yellow one right there, like. Because, like, clearly the road was okay.
Yeah.
But the train was across the tracks. I was like, can I just... And he's like, yeah, no problem. So he moved the barrier so that I could pull into my driveway.
Yeah.
And come to find out, some kids who lived in, like, the apartments or the houses on the other side of the tracks, the wrong side of the tracks,
Of course, yeah.
they were out playing by the trains. And I think it was just some of the cars that were just sitting on the tracks. I think they somehow moved the cars. Like, those things are heavy, so I don't know if it was...
Yeah.
I don't know all the details, but they were playing around the tracks. And one boy got stuck under and lost his leg. Lost a leg and almost lost the other one.
Oh my gosh. Oh. When was that?
Oh, this was years ago. This
Okay.
was... Ooh. Probably 6 years ago.
Okay. Oh, that's terrifying.
Maybe
I hate
almost
that.
7. Because we've been here. We've been in that house. It'll be 8 years in August. So.
Man. As long as Jarek and I have been together as a couple. Well, that's horrifying. Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, no, I'm not at all terrified about Walker getting older.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, let me take you south of here to Maco, North Carolina.
I've never heard of it.
For some reason, when I was telling my dad, oh, it's Macon. Okay.
Okay, I was like, well, there's Macon, Georgia.
Yeah, well, when I was talking to my dad about it, we kept calling it Macon, but then I was like, I'm pretty sure I wrote Maco on here. Anyways, go south, not north, to Maco, North Carolina, which is near Wilmington. And also, we're going back in time to 1867. So my only reference for that is the Civil War was around then. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay,
Sure. Yep.
Great. All right. So a train is traveling along the Wilmington and Manchester Railroad, which ran from Wilmington to Manchester, South Carolina, which is now Sumter, South Carolina. Is 173 miles.
I actually know where Sumter is.
Great. 173 mile track. So on this day, it was raining, obviously, and
Why? Obviously.
because it's a spooky story.
Okay.
So a rainy night.
I think fog is spookier than rain.
Well, maybe it was foggy.
Okay, a rainy night, I think, trumps foggy.
Okay. Well, it was either raining or foggy because there was low visibility.
We should have a poll.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, a listener poll. We'll put it on Instagram or something.
Okay.
What do you think is like the spookiest weather setting?
Ooh.
We'll definitely put it on our Patreon because
Okay.
I think we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because polls you can really only do on Instagram stories, and they're only 24 hours. And
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
so if you're a patron, we'll have a poll there.
Yep.
Otherwise, maybe we'll like post the question on like an Instagram post, and you
Yeah.
can go comment.
Go comment on it.
So I mean, we can do: is your vote like a foggy night, a rainy night,
Stormy night,
yeah, stormy night? Like so, or
just a clear.
sunny day when terror happens.
Oh gosh, that's the worst.
You know,
A
like-
clear, quiet night. Ugh.
or just middle of the day when it's all everything's supposed to be sunshine, lollipops, and
Ugh. Okay, well, it's rainy in our story.
okay,
We'll say-
obviously.
Obviously. Okay, so there is a signalman, a man who is in charge of signals.
Gotta interrupt real quick one more
Please.
time.
Yes.
I cannot wait to get all of the text messages from my dad correcting you on train lingo. Because
I didn't even think about that.
yeah, so my dad, actually my granddaddy, his dad, worked for the railroad.
Ooh.
And my dad also worked for the railroad, I think when he was like co-oping in college.
Uh-huh.
But he'd worked for the railroad for a little while around then. So growing up with his dad, like he would go to work with my granddaddy sometimes, and
Uh-huh.
the cute stories there that I won't bore anyone else with.
Oops, sorry.
So yeah, my dad grew up around railroads.
Oh man.
He enjoys when he comes up to visit.
Uh-huh.
When I was talking about good memories, I also have good memories sitting on the front porch having some whiskey drinks with my dad, long
Aw.
chats while we watch the trains go back and forth. And,
That's sweet.
you know, so my dad, he knows trains, so no pressure.
No pressure.
But
Oh,
you're
gosh.
going to
Okay.
be receiving some,
Okay,
some
well-
feedback. I can guarantee it.
The word is the word signal and man
Mm-hmm.
put together into one word. So I'm saying signalman.
I would go with that.
Okay, great. So this employee of the railroad was named
I didn't mean to make you feel self-conscious.
It's okay. I'm going to say it several more times. Okay. His name was Joe Baldwin. And he was on the train. And he noticed that the car that he was on, which happened to be the caboose, or the last car. I don't know.
Caboose. I just made a face because caboose is just such a funny word.
I know,
It makes me giggle.
And when I said it, I was like, I wonder if that's actually what it's called. Because it sounds very much like a...
As far as I know, it's a caboose.
Okay, great. He's on the caboose.
It's a funny word.
Well, not funny is that the caboose had detached from the rest of the train.
It's detached?
Detached.
There we go.
Did I say it?
Attached.
Oh, no. It detached. Sorry. It was attached, and then it became attached. So
uncoupled.
Uncoupled. Yes, I have that word in here somewhere. Okay, so they're passing through Maco, North Carolina when this happens. And so the train just keeps going, and the caboose is just slowly losing momentum. But Joe knew that another train was following them. And if we know anything, we know that trains cannot stop quickly.
No. Their brakes don't work like that.
They don't at all. So Joe was like, okay, I have to let this other train know.
Good thing he's a signal man and can signal.
Right? So, and he's like, there's people on the oncoming train, I guess. So he realized that a collision at full speed would probably injure or kill people on the other train.
Right. So,
also, certainly him.
Is it just him on the caboose?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So at least it's just him.
Yes.
I would be off of the caboose and several yards away because...
Well, here's the thing.
It would derail the other train, right?
I guess.
Potentially?
So this is one of those, like, moral hypotheticals where it's like, if you can save a car full of people that you don't know, or you can save, like, one loved one.
Yeah.
But saving your loved one would cause the car full of people you don't know to die. Yeah. So this is kind of what Joe is facing, right? Because he's like, I have to signal for this, but, like, in order for me to signal, I have to be on the caboose. So I either have to save myself and sacrifice potentially hundreds of other people, or I can take the risk and stay on the caboose and hopefully make the crash less damaging. And so Joe is a good person. So he decided to stay on the caboose, and he stood on the back.
Too bad it was raining. Otherwise, I'd say light a fire and get out of there. Or go light a fire on the tracks. Like,
that might cause more damage.
Well, like small fires, kind of like flares.
Okay.
Like, I know that this is pre-flare, but, like, again, if it wasn't raining, like, you could start walking towards where the other train is and just, like, have some, make some branches and small fires.
It's a good idea. But unfortunately, it was raining.
Yeah.
So Joe stands on the back platform with a lantern, and he starts waving it around frantically to signal the oncoming train. So the train sees the lantern, thankfully, applies the brakes. That obviously does not immediately stop it. So there was a collision. Joe was unfortunately decapitated in this collision.
Eesh.
Yeah. So he dies.
Well, generally that's the
yeah
the conclusion to a decapitation.
So some versions of this story say that his head was actually thrown into a nearby swamp and was never recovered. And so his body was therefore buried sans head.
Is this like a headless horseman kind of tale?
Kind of.
Because doesn't he carry around a lantern?
Oh, he does.
Some parallels there.
Well, shortly after this very tragic accident, which I assume the people on the oncoming train were mostly okay. I'm going to say that.
Probably we're going to go with like mild injuries.
Mild injuries.
Some bruises, contusions, a concussion or two.
Yes, but Joe's sacrifice was not in vain. So shortly after this, locals of Maco began reporting a white light along the railroad tracks. Sometimes there would be 2 lights, sometimes they would be green or red, but most often the light would be seen bobbing around at about what appeared to be about 5 feet off the ground, and the path that it was taking would be as if someone was walking like on the tracks or along the tracks with a lantern held in front of them. So rumors spread that this was Joe walking around looking for his missing head. So the lights were seen by like a ton of people, including allegedly President Grover Cleveland.
Oh boy.
Our most famous president. And this was happening up until 1977 when the tracks were pulled up. And according to the Cape Fear Museum historian, Harry Warren, there are still some reports of the light, but they have greatly diminished since the tracks got pulled up. So, now that I've told you that story, are you familiar with any kind of light on the tracks story?
I'm familiar with lights, especially in swampy areas, because swamp gas.
I forgot that we're going to get sciencey in this too. Yes. I picked the Maco one to be our main story because it's local.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many. I've sat on the tracks like with my cousins and looked down the track because, you know, there's allegedly a light. And I don't know if this is the same place, but I asked my parents when I was home over the weekend. I was like, is there a local story that you grew up hearing of a light on the tracks? And my dad was like, oh, absolutely. Early Station. I was like, oh, okay. Obviously, everyone knows that.
Duh.
I think it's in Ahoskie, North Carolina, which is where he grew up. But it's essentially the exact same story that a train employee was decapitated. And that if you park on the tracks.
I think there's a similar story out in Cove City, like super local.
See, and I want to go sit on the tracks again and do it.
Come on over anytime you want. I can attest that there is definitely a light on the tracks by our house because it shines right into our bedroom window. So we have to have our curtains drawn.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, it is so bright and comes right through our bedroom windows and it hits the mirror on the dresser.
That's the worst.
So then it reflects elsewhere. So
well,
if I go to bed and, you know, like Shelton's still awake and I don't close his curtains, it's not fun.
That's why a sleep mask is so helpful for me.
I would love to be like bougie and wear a sleep mask. Like, that's like the epitome of like girliness.
It does end
in
up
a way.
Like underneath me by morning time.
But it's so uncomfortable at first. Like, it's not uncomfortable. It's just like there's something on my face and there shouldn't be. I think it's one of those things you just have to get used to. Yeah. And I have tried and tried and tried like multiple times throughout my life. Really? Especially when I was younger and like wanted to be a girly girl. Yeah. And, like a sleep mask. And I have tried so many times and I could never fall asleep with it on.
Oh. See, I now have to, I don't have to, but like, I think one of the things I like about it is there's like a very slight pressure on your eyes. And for whatever reason that, I don't know if it just keeps my eyes closed so that I'm not like more prone to.
See, for you, it relaxes you. For me, it's
like an irritant.
It's an irritant.
Yeah.
It's like a tag on the back of my neck.
Yeah, that's
or
the worst.
The toe of my sock being kind of off to the side, the seam.
Yeah.
Rubbing on my toes the wrong way.
Well, I'm sorry for you. And I hope that maybe one day that will change because sleep masks are not anything that makes me feel girly because I feel like I look very stupid when I feel like it's like the equivalent of like a mouth guard. I'm like,
it makes me think of like when I was younger, I was all about Limited 2, that
Ooh,
store.
Uh-huh.
And I got the catalogs, and I treated those catalogs like a lifestyle magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this is the room that I want. Like, this is the life that, like, this is the girl that I want to be.
Right.
And it's like 2 girls like hanging out and like in their fuzzy slippers and their cute pajamas and their robes and their sleep mask kind of, you know, up on their heads, and they're talking on their cool, like, clear see-through phones
yes.
on their inflatable chairs. And I'm like, that is what I want. That is the life I need to be living. And Sleep Mask was one of those. Like, I had the inflatable chairs, and I'm like, this is not very comfortable.
No, those
and
are
like,
awful.
it doesn't sit, like, I can't really sit in it.
No, it's like sitting on a
beach
ball.
there's like no good back to it, so I just,
if you lean back too far, it falls over, and there's always a leak in it somewhere.
the phone I had, and it was perfect.
Nice.
The fuzzy slippers I had, and they were great until they started to smell.
Of course.
Because my feet would sweat and stink. And robes, like, I tried, but I don't get, like, they just never stayed closed, and they just weren't a comfort to me. And then
See, I do
the
love
sleep
that
mask.
robe. Well, to burst that inflatable chair bubble of, I can just tell you that, granted, I sleep in like a t-shirt because
Me too.
that's also a sensory thing for me, is I can't have like pants on.
I used to sleep in like a tank top and shorts, and now, and like, when I was a kid, it was a t-shirt. It was like one of my dad's t-shirts.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yep.
And then I got older, and it was tank top and like sleep shorts. Now it's t-shirts again.
Yep.
It's Shelton's t-shirts.
T-shirts. And then when I put the sleep mask on, I have to do it like a headband. Like, I have to get my hair over it and put it on. But without fail, every morning I wake up and that thing is either like halfway at my head. Today it was underneath me because I got out of bed, and Jared was like, "You were sitting on your sleep mask this whole time." I'm like, "I don't know how it got there." And it fucks your hair up too. So like, it's not a. That's why I think of it as like a. If I want to.
It's not as glamorous as it looks.
No,
it's not as glamorous as Audrey Hepburn makes it look in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
It's not like a.
Because it was Limited 2, and Audrey Hepburn made me want to wear a sleep mask.
Yeah, it's like, if I'm trying to go to bed cute, I'm not doing the sleep mask. Anyway,
all this to say, lights around train tracks.
Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some truth, or the truth about this story of Joe Baldwin.
Did he actually exist?
Well, Joe Baldwin did not exist, but Charles Baldwin existed. He was a conductor.
So not a signalman.
Not a signalman. But he worked for the railroad at least in 1856. So, 10-ish
there was
years.
a Baldwin working for the railroad in that
the
general time frame.
In the mid-19th century, there was a guy named Mr. Baldwin who worked for this railroad station or track. He had moved to North Carolina from New York, which I guess is the norm.
Well, Baldwin seems like a New York name, at least especially at that time.
Yeah, I'm still baffled by how many New Yorkers are down here. I married one.
Well, no snow.
What?
I said there's no snow.
Oh yeah, there's no snow, but there's also not snow in a lot of places.
Yeah. Well, also North Carolina. There's also something about I've heard saying part of the reason, especially our town is so full. Like our town is basically 50% retirees.
Yes.
And a lot of it is snowbirds. So it's people from up north or other places that wanted to move south for the warmerness, but not all the way to Florida. But North Carolina, I think, doesn't tax on federal pensions or something.
Oh.
So
nice.
there's something about taxes and pensions, and that's why a lot of people retire to North Carolina.
Yeah. And the area that we're in, the cost of living isn't insane. So that makes sense.
I mean, it certainly wasn't when we moved here. Now the housing market is absurd.
For real. I would love the price on my house to increase.
Ours has almost doubled.
Really? Yeah. Ours is just eking along. Okay, so Charles Baldwin was also, quote, highly esteemed for his many good qualities. So just a great guy. Well, on January 4th of 1856, the train uncoupled. But it did so on purpose. It did this so that the engineer, Nicholas Walker, could take the engine ahead to work on some mechanical whatever. However, when it came back, there was no light on the rest of the train. I don't know if the light went out or if the signalman was asleep.
Sleeping on the job.
Yeah. But the engine collided with the rest of the train.
That's what it sounds like happens across the street all the time.
Yes. There was a male agent on board whose name was E.L. Sherwood, and he was, quote, slightly injured. But Mr. Baldwin was thrown from the car and sustained a serious head injury. He didn't lose it. He just injured it. And he unfortunately died 3 days later on January 7th. So, obviously, it's very possible that 10 to 20 years later, when people started seeing this light, they started telling the story and names change and like the death gets more sensational.
Well, it's probably, somebody just names, like, oh, it's Joe.
Yeah.
And then someone's like, well, actually, there was
that
somebody
guy,
who
Baldwin.
did die.
Yeah.
Hey, he hit his head, or did he lose his head? I don't
Something
remember. I
happened with
remember
his head.
hearing the
Yeah.
story. It's been a long time. Yeah, maybe he did get decapitated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I could very easily see that story changing over like 2 retellings of it. You know, the name changes, the manner of death changes. They add that nice heroic element, maybe because Charles Baldwin was such a nice guy.
Maybe. Well, I don't know. I feel like just that adds to like the tragedy of the death.
Yeah.
And makes, it makes him even more of like, a lost soul.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. More of a reason for him to be wandering around the track.
Right.
Exactly. Well, skeptics obviously don't believe that this is a ghost.
Nope.
One of the explanations is reflected car headlights, which is like the most boring explanation. The other one is phosphorescent gas.
Swamp gas.
From the swamp. Okay, I'm going to do my best to explain what causes this, and then you can tell everyone what actually causes it.
I'm sure you have it.
Okay.
Might need to clarify some things, but I'm sure you got it. I trust you.
All right. So, methane or phosphine, which I think is rarer, is released from stagnant waters because it's produced by anaerobic bacteria that feed on dead, decaying stuff. And when those gases are released, they're combustible, essentially, and so they can be, or they're flammable. I don't know.
Combustible and flammable are basically kind of the same thing.
They can catch on fire.
Yeah.
And so they can create small fireballs. So they have been.
So you've everybody's like heard the story, or like there's even videos of it. Especially every little boy has joked about lighting farts on fire.
Yes, I'm not positive that my husband or his brother have not done that.
Oh, I'm certain they've tried. Anywho, that's basically what it is.
Okay.
Is
a flammable gas.
The swamp is farting.
Yes, nice. Love that.
And it
and the farts catch on fire.
And it lights on fire.
Nice. Well, these flames, there's actually like a whole other road we could go down, track we could go down.
There we go.
If you will. Because these flames have also been known to be called will-o-wisps, which is like a whole other thing. But some descriptions that I found of this particular phenomenon, sometimes they were described as bluish, having a bluish luminosity with a yellow center and like not bright enough to cast light anywhere. Some of them persisted, quote, up to 15 minutes in the same place, often located 6 feet above the ground, which would track with what we're talking about.
Would track.
Track. And then another one, which does not make any sense to me in my small science brain. They were described as, quote, cool to the touch and up to 6 inches tall and 1.5 inches in diameter. How is fire cool to the touch, Katie?
I mean, there's...
Explain cold fire.
Well, the best I can think of is endothermic versus exothermic reactions.
Okay.
So, did you ever study that in school?
Vaguely.
So...
I know the difference between endo and exo.
Yeah, so I remember doing an experiment where we had some solutions in some beakers, and... you know, one, we added something and that created an exothermic reaction, meaning when we touched the beaker, it was warm.
Right.
And then there was the other one that was the endothermic. So it was still like, it's kind of like implosion versus explosion.
Okay.
Still a big
thing.
Reaction.
Yeah.
Like a big combustion.
Right.
But one was cold and one was hot.
Okay. It's so confusing to me.
And again, chemistry has never been my thing, and this is
chemistry. So will-o-wisps have been known to be harbingers. Okay, I'm bad with that word.
Harbinger.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hard G. Harbingers of bad news and death. Omens, if you will.
I thought will-o-wisps were more seen as like kind of good luck things, like fairies, like not fairies, like in, you know, British lore.
Yeah,
like those are
not those fairies,
not those kind of fairies, but like fairy with a Y.
Yeah, I think there are maybe different interpretations of them because, like I said, that could have been a whole other topic. I've also read description of things that are called will-o-wisps. Will-o-wisps as being close to the ground and in short bursts, which is kind of what...
More like a firefly.
Yes. But also like kind of what I felt like was being described with like a fart that like it's caught, like lit on fire. It's kind of a quick thing. It's not like a slow burning
orb of light
that bobs around. So... I don't know. There is another possible explanation. This one's my favorite, and this is what I hope it is if it's not a ghost. Luminous owls.
Nice.
Let me explain.
Please do.
Okay, so some owls may have a glowing fungus or algae on their feathers, presumably from the material where they're nesting.
I'm here for it. I mean, there's...
Okay.
Yeah.
Or they could just be white owls that glow in the moonlight.
Yeah.
And there was an experiment. This is like not necessarily related, but a very funny experiment to me. So they found that white barn owls had a slight advantage in hunting during a full moon. And they were like, well, that doesn't make sense because in a full moon, they would be more visible to prey. So why would they have an advantage? Because, per this experiment, in the experiment they used voles, right, as the prey. And they didn't actually kill them. They used a taxidermied owl that they would like bring in on a zip line. But the voles, when they saw the glowing owl, well, when they saw either owl, glowing or not, they would like freeze for a minute as like a fear response before they would run. The glowing owl was more scary to them, and so they froze for a little bit longer when they saw it, which gave that owl presumably more time to swoop in and be very scary and eat them. But I love that science fact that like glowing owls are scary. It's scientifically proven.
Tell me an owl comes swooping at you, you're not screaming.
First of all, owls are terrifying in and of themselves.
Yeah.
We all know they killed
the woman. They knocked her down the stairs.
Yeah. I get confused because there's 2 Peterson cases. Also, to be fair, I don't believe that. I think Michael Peterson 100% killed his wife. But,
Oh, for sure.
but that's neither here nor there.
It was not an owl.
It was not an owl.
Why was an owl in your house?
Why would there be an owl in your house?
Owls don't live in houses.
Also, I feel like there would be a lot more evidence of an owl other than some microscopic
At
feathers.
best, owls live in barns. Are you saying you live in a barn?
No. I would
also feel extra weird having to crouch down while I'm making these comments.
We'll fix it. Okay. So, that's the Maco Light. But as I said, it's a very common myth or legend. So I'm going to tell you a couple more. So this first one is the headless signalman of... Ooh, what's that?
Swamp gas.
Oh, wait, that's swamp gas right there? Oh, what? Are you sure it's swamp gas and not a ghost? Because
it said quadcopter at night or swamp gas. Here's one.
What's a quadcopter?
I don't know. This is swamp gas or wandering lights.
I do really want to see swamp gas now.
Me too. That's why I looked up videos. It says pictures.
Yeah. I like that they circled it like we wouldn't see that random. That's Northern Lights.
Yeah, more. But in India, so there's a random light, but... Yeah.
Truthfully, though, if I saw those, I would be more apt to believe that it was a ghost rather than some weird science
swamp
thing.
fart.
Yeah. I'd be like, that... 90-10 that it's a ghost rather than the swamp randomly farting fire.
I've never witnessed it, but I haven't been... Well, here's a video of lighting swamp gas on fire. So, anyhow.
Anyway.
I've spent a lot of time in, on, and around swamps. I've definitely smelled like that...
Swamp fart.
Oh, yeah. Like that like sulfurous, like swamp...
Yeah.
rotten eggs smell. And yeah, it's because I mean the swamps, you know, they're black. They're all this dead decaying detritus, like all these leaves are down there at the bottom, and they are slowly decaying. And yeah, it's like you said, the bacteria that eats it up releases gas.
Gross.
Just like all things.
Everyone farts.
Humans release gas. And my husband definitely releases gas. It's gotten a lot better now that the gallbladder's gone, though.
Oh, that's good. Maybe Jarek should get his gallbladder out.
I don't recommend it. Unless he's got gallbladder problems. Yeah, then I very much recommend it. But yeah, it was funny. For like a long time, Sheldon would fart, and I'd be like, are you sick? Like, that is beyond foul. Like,
oh, yeah.
I was, for a long time, I was literally, like, genuinely questioning, like, are you feeling okay? Because, like, you, that's not a normal, healthy fart. No. I was like, also, it's not his normal fart smell. And then it was like, and that was like that for, like, a year, maybe?
Wow.
And then he started having the stomach pains for almost a year.
Huh.
And then now his farts don't stink like they used to.
Okay, I really might get Jarek to go. Jarek, make an appointment with your doctor and get your gallbladder checked out, because if this is a solution...
Again, like, he needs to be, like, doubled over in pain.
Yeah, I know, probably.
For it to be like, yes, let's look at our gallbladder.
And I don't want to say unfortunately, but...
It's just another incident of Katie is always right.
Like, obviously you are.
I think there's something wrong with you. Like, you should not be emitting these kind of smells.
He's like, no, it's fine. And then a year later,
and he's like,
gallbladder.
You know, I guess it doesn't smell as bad as it used to. And I'm like, yeah, because you're not sick anymore. You know, like all the times I asked if you were sick. It's like, there's something wrong with your intestines. Or your, not your intestines, but your internal organs. Turns out one was very, very sick.
Yes, there you go. Boys are gross. I'm gonna say it again.
And wives know best.
All right, so this is the headless signalman of Chapel Hill, Tennessee. I got excited when I read it first because I was like, oh, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I've been there.
It was funny, before you said Chapel Hill, for some reason I was thinking it was going to be Tennessee.
Well, yeah, Tennessee seems like a place that has a lot of ghost trains, train ghosts. Okay.
I hope my dad texts a story about... I really hope that...
I know, me too.
He has here's the ghost story from when I was growing up.
Yes. And like, I'll go ahead and say, because I have it at the end, if anyone listening has a story about their local ghost light at the train tracks, let us know. Because I want to hear it.
We want to know it.
I want to know what the alleged origin of the light is, and I also want to know if you've seen it and if you have videos, because I'm so close to going back out to the Hosky and just I don't want to do it
on the tracks.
I don't want to do it by myself though. It sounds dangerous for many reasons. Yeah. Okay, so this story I got from the Tennessee Ghosts and Legends podcast. Okay, so there are 3 versions of this story. Version number 1 is that one night, after several days of heavy rain, part of the fill beneath the track, this particular track in Chapel Hill, had been washed away near the trestle that crossed the Duck River. Mind you, I did go on Google Maps and try to find all this. Impossible. So I don't know. In my research, the Duck River wasn't even close to Chapel Hill.
I've never heard of Chapel Hill, Tennessee, nor have I heard of the Duck River. What part of Tennessee is Chapel Hill in? Middle,
great question.
East, or west?
Let me look it up and I'll tell you. Okay. I always forget that
because I'm mostly familiar with East Tennessee. So middle. Not at all familiar with the only thing in West Tennessee is it's flat and Memphis.
Yeah. That's
all I know. Because I'm West Tennessee is not really Tennessee.
It's south of Nashville. So it's
okay, so it's middle.
Middle, yeah. Okay. It's south. It's almost directly south of Nashville. It's a little southeast. Get out of here. Okay. So this heavy rain has created essentially a hazard on the tracks.
Especially right before a bridge. Not ideal.
Yes, not ideal. So a lone signalman was sent to warn oncoming trains. Why they only sent one, I don't know. So he's trying to warn the oncoming trains that they're trying to repair this area. So stop before you get there. But on this night, he saw a train approaching and he began waving his lantern around to try to get the conductor to stop or to see him. But because the rain was so heavy, the conductor could not see this light. So, said signalman stands in the middle of the tracks and starts waving and jumping around and trying to signal this guy. He's not planning on standing there and sacrificing himself. So he goes to move off the track when he's surely they see me now. But he slips because of the rain and he hits his head on one of the rails. And the conductor finally sees the lantern laying beside the tracks, pulls the brake. It takes several hundred yards for the train to stop. And when it stopped, the conductor got out and was surely there's a person here because I saw the lantern. So he goes looking for the person who had been carrying the lantern. And when he finds him, the train had severed his head from his body. So the conductor freaks out, obviously, and he tells the brakeman and the engineer on the train, he's we killed someone. he's so freaked out that they're like, okay, you need to go home because you can't do your job anymore.
No.
So they like call a cab for him and send him.
Where are they?
Don't
Like,
know.
they're on a railroad track, but near a river because there's a bridge. And
But there's also a road.
And you can, like,
And you have access.
there's not
to...
radios to, like, radio
no
to an
idea.
oncoming train.
Who knows?
That there's, like, the tracks are malfunctioned. Or you couldn't even, like, send out a bulletin to other, like, depots and whatnot. Like, hey, this route is temporarily closed.
Yeah. I don't know what...
But you can call a cab in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of night, in the middle of a heavy rain?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know how they're calling the cab.
What time, like, what year is this? Like, when in history is this happening? Like, it's recent enough that cabs exist, but radios don't? Especially,
I don't know.
radios, or even just send a freaking telegram.
I know, some
like,
Morse
hey,
code.
Don't come down this track for a couple of days. We're repairing it.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, like, I'm pretty sure that even in the early days of trains, there was some sort of telegram or bulletin that went out to let other train depots know when certain tracks and routes were under construction.
Ships could do that. My frame of reference being the Titanic.
Yeah.
They sent out an SOS and, like, were communicating with other ships in the area, and they're in the water.
Middle of the ocean.
Surely trains can do something of the sort.
They can, and don't call me Shirley.
Maybe they telegrammed for a cab to come. I don't know.
Seems slow.
Don't know.
If cabs exist, then radios exist.
Maybe they
surely
telegram
somebody who is, like, big in history. What came first, cabs? Or
that's actually
radios?
a great question. Cabs or telegrams?
Or radios?
Maybe they just sent a little telegraph to his wife, and she drove out and picked him up. I don't know. But when could women drive cars? So...
Well, that, and again, like, if they're on a train, they're, like, especially, like, unless it's, like, a commuter, like, a person train, I'm thinking, like, cargo trains.
Yeah.
It's, like, unless it's, like, a commuter, like, a person train, I feel like they're doing long hauls.
Yeah.
Like, they're not just gonna call his wife. His wife is probably, like, 3 states away.
That's
right?
true. That is probably very true. I don't know. We're getting hung up on the wrong part of this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Details, man.
That's okay. The reason that this part is important, that they
put him in a cab.
They took a moment and like diverted their attention to the engineer, because when they returned,
his body was gone.
His body was gone, and all that was left was the lantern. I don't know where his head was. And then several years later, from this mysterious time that we don't know where we're at, people started seeing a light on the tracks. That's version 1. Version 2, we have some dates.
All right, good. Now we know what time in history we're working with.
It's 1940.
So radios exist.
Yes.
As do cabs.
Specifically December of 1940. And a single mother, who I guess was not important enough to have a first name, because we only know her by Mrs. Ketchum, went missing from her home, from her rural home near Chapel Hill. And she left behind 2 teenage sons. So after she was reported missing, which was 2 weeks later, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Was it just when the No, so it wasn't even when the boys ran out of food, because 2 teenage boys are going to run out of food
in days.
In like 2 days, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe.
I have no idea why.
She'll get reported missing a lot sooner.
Yeah. So whenever police got involved.
Ma, where's the food? We're out of pizza rolls.
When were pizza rolls invented? Okay, so the police get involved, and they quickly zero in on a neighbor as a person of interest. I don't know what caused him to become a person of interest, but they interrogated him a bunch. But even though they interrogated him like very thoroughly and probably very aggressively. They couldn't link him to a crime without a body. And then one day when they
no
went...
body, no crime.
Exactly. When they went back to question him again, everyone please remember our Charles Lindbergh story, they found that their suspect had died by suicide. Hello, Violet Sharp, who was also harassed by police until she took her own life. And similar to that story, locals saw this suicide as like a
sign of guilt,
admission of guilt. So in their eyes, the case was closed. They're like, well, we found out who did it, obviously, and like...
They found out nothing.
Except
Like, even if he was guilty, they still don't know what he did, how he did it, or where her body is. Yeah. They know nothing.
Exactly. But locals, I think, were just like, whatever.
They probably just didn't like him for whatever reason.
Yeah.
They're happy to be rid of him.
Her two boys were adopted out to another family out of state, so they can't really be involved anymore. And then the source that I read said almost a year later, but then it said January of 1941, which would be a month later. So we're going to go with January of 1940.
The following year. We'll go with that. It's right for both ways.
It's in the early 40s, and it's been a year. Some locals who had not decided that the case was closed.
You mean the people with brains?
Yes. They decided, they're like, well, fuck the police. Let's find someone else. So they contact a local clairvoyant.
Okay, maybe let me take it back about the people with brains comment.
This guy's name was Simon Warner. And so they, I guess, crowdsourced his fee and hired him. And he allegedly spoke to Mrs. Ketchum's spirit because she was dead. And he described in very great detail where her body was, which was near the train tracks. So either Mr. Warner or the locals go to police and they're like, listen, for what it's worth, here's a location if you want to check there. Police do, and there is Mrs. Ketchum's body. Right where Mr. Warner said that it was going to be. For some reason, the local medical examiner did not perform an autopsy, and there is no cause of death listed on her death certificate. But allegedly, the light that people would see near the tracks, according to this legend, it would be specifically attracted to boys or young men, and it would like approach them, this light would. And the story is that it was Mrs. Ketchum looking for her two boys. And so when she saw a young man or an adolescent boy, she would go, or her spirit would go to see if it was her boys, and then it would rush away, quote, when the spirit of her neighbor and abductor comes for her, which now's a good time to mention that he was not found guilty. We don't know if he's involved. But that's that story.
Okay, I know we're going to get hung up on details again. I don't want to get into the trenches on this, but how do you find a dead body and be like, well, it's dead.
No,
that's it. Case closed. Like, you can't just look and be like, oh, look, blunt force trauma, or strangulation, or stab wounds, or, and if there's no visible things, can't you just be like, probably natural causes, like maybe poison, maybe heart attack, we don't know.
Maybe because it was a year later, the body was like
too badly decomposed.
Yeah, in such poor condition.
But didn't we say it was also potentially a month later?
Yeah, it was either a month or a year.
So if it was a month, also in the winter, Decomp is much slower
That's a good point.
in the winter.
Well, maybe they also were just like, well, she's a woman, so who cares?
She's dead. We found the answer. We found her body. We know who did it.
Yeah, our main suspect is dead.
She was murdered. Probably. We're not even gonna officially say she was murdered.
Yeah, we're just gonna leave it at that. I'm sure she was probably also cremated immediately. Conveniently.
It's a conspiracy. It was the chief of police. She was in a torrid affair.
Ooh.
And she threatened to expose him.
What if it was the clairvoyant? And that's how he knew her body was.
That's the thing, is I'm like, how did this group of villagers find this clairvoyant, by the way?
Yellow Pages.
Did he
Angie's
volunteer his services?
Yeah, that is, I don't know. I'm sure one person had a cousin who had a friend who went there.
Or, did he have, like an inside man, like sitting in the bar and waiting for other people to talk, like, trying to figure out who did it. Why don't you hire this clairvoyant dude?
Yeah. I love, by the way, stories of, like, overheard in a bar or, like, weird, like, I'm thinking of the rumors about the Anglin brothers escape, where it was like, and then this woman met some guy in a bar who said that he had escaped from a federal prison, and the one that I was like, this is the start of, like, a romance novel that I will write. But
I really want you to. I will read it.
Ooh, I will. Let's have a writing/book club. And I'll write that specific story.
Okay, sounds good. I got a couple stories I've got in the works here.
Perfect. I love this. Anyway, that was way off track. We derailed a little bit here.
Time to get back on track.
Back on track. Version 3 of this story is a single line. It's that a young local man named Skip Agent was hit and killed by the train on June 8th, 1942. And that it's him. That the light is him.
Just 'cause.
Yeah.
Because clearly he didn't have a light on him at the time, and that's why he got hit.
Obviously.
So now he's got a light
now
in
he
death.
is the light. Yeah. So, some sightings of this light, allegedly, in the 1950s, so we're back to our Mrs. Ketchum-ish time period, there were two boys named Jackie and Pee-wee.
That's not their names.
So they were out specifically looking for the light with their uncle. So the light has already become a legend. They're out looking for it. Eventually, a light appears in the distance, and it is moving erratically, but also coming towards them. So they move off of the track to, like, get out of its way.
Probably just a good idea to be not on the tracks to begin with.
Yes. But the light comes closer and closer. It suddenly stops, and then it rushes towards them much faster, and it hits Jackie in the chest. And both their uncle and Pee-wee would later say that they felt a loud thud through the ground when the light hit this other kid. And then Jackie said it, quote, felt like a powerful force paralyzed him, holding him still. And then the light passed through him and then just disappeared further down the rails. Which that would kind of correlate to the legend, or to the myth that it's Mrs. Ketchum looking for her boys.
So she, like, grabbed him and was like, "You're not my son."
You're not him.
She's like, "My boys," running towards them. Grab. You're not him.
You're not him. Goodbye.
Get out of my way.
Exactly. Yeah. I have other things to do. The second story is in 1970, or in the 1970s, where four presumably teenage boys went out to the tracks to look for the light. They parked their car on the crossing gate, and they left the car running because I guess their squishy teenage boy brains had a part that was thinking logically and said we shouldn't turn our car off when we're sitting in the middle of the tracks. So they sit there, they see a light coming down the track on the passenger side. And it was approaching quickly.
Yeah, like trains do.
Like trains might. So everyone in the car is like, okay, let's get the car off the tracks now because, you know. So the driver tried to, but the engine would just rev. It wouldn't actually move. I would argue that maybe he has the car in park and doesn't realize it, but the car's not going anywhere. This light gets closer and closer. It's not a train, don't worry. It's an orb. And it collides with the car. And they all felt / heard a thud when this light hit them. Mm-hmm. And after several minutes, it continued. It just went through the car and down the other side of the tracks. Once it was gone, the car suddenly was able to move. And so they immediately got off the tracks and drove to a nearby gas station. And when they got out to examine the car, they found, quote, rows of deep scratches in the paint on the back of the car. I like that one because it reminds me of the legends of, like, the children that push your car. Have you heard those? Mm-hmm. If you put, like, baby powder or whatever on your back bumper and you park, which sounds so reckless, that children will push your car, or someone will push your car and you can go back and see, like, little handprints in the flour, which is terrifying. Okay, so truth to this myth or legend. There isn't any evidence to support the first story of the guy who just got hit by the train, who fell and hit his head. There was a Ketchum family that lived in the Chapel Hill area in the 1940s, but there's not any record of an abduction or murder or missing persons case. And there was a Skip Agent. Like, his story is true. There was a guy named Skip Agent who got hit and killed by the train.
So far, he's the most plausible, I guess.
So far, he's the one that we know least about.
The least detailed story
is the one
most accurate.
Yeah. Interestingly, the reason I was on Google Maps looking for this whole thing, I couldn't find any swamps near the area.
Yeah, no, so I am not saying swamp gas because Middle Tennessee is not exactly a swampy area.
Yes. I did look up swamps in Tennessee, and there weren't any listed in Marshall County, which is where Chapel Hill is. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know what the explanation that skeptics have is, other than, like, these stories aren't true, or you're just seeing either a train light or a car light reflected somewhere. But that's the signalman of Chapel Hill. And then...
Or the Mrs. Ketchum.
Or the Mrs. Ketchum of Chapel Hill. And then the last story I have is a little different. The Light of Saratoga. This I would like to add to our road trip, which I realize is not convenient if we're going to spend a lot of time in Illinois.
Also, there's Saratoga Springs, which I was thinking of, but that's New York.
Okay.
Saratoga County is in New York also. There's the Saratoga Group in Knoxville, Tennessee. Saratoga Springs is also a city in Utah.
Wow.
And there's a Saratoga, North Carolina.
Oh, where's that?
West of Greenville.
Oh.
Almost directly south of Rocky Mountain Tarboro. Yeah, like you should...
I should know it.
Yeah. Saratoga, North Carolina.
I would bet that I have been through it, because I've been through Wilson.
I've definitely been through it, I'm sure.
Dang. Well, I wish it was this Saratoga, because this one is cool. I want to go see this one.
And Saratoga is a city in California.
Oh, okay.
So, all right.
There we go. We've learned a lot.
You could have been like, Springfield. Do you know where that is?
Do you know where Springfield is? I know.
Literally every state.
Everywhere.
I think Hawaii is the only state that doesn't have a Springfield, right? Hawaii and...
Should have just made you guess. Which of the 49 states am I talking about? Okay.
That's why my brain was like, I think it's Texas. But then there's Saratoga Springs, but is that California or is that
Utah?
Somewhere else? Or New York?
It does actually, Saratoga does sound like a New York thing.
Yeah, but it also sounds like an out west thing. Like,
yeah,
it makes me think of cactuses. Sorry, cacti.
Yes, cacti. Okay. So there is a road that runs through Saratoga or out of Saratoga called Bragg Road. Bragg, like Fort Bragg. It's a former railroad that connected the now abandoned town of Bragg, Texas, to Saratoga. It is a completely straight 8-mile stretch of road.
Okay.
I looked it up on Google Maps, and it's just a very, very straight line. It's lined with pine trees, cypress trees. It's like pretty forested, at least on one side for like the whole way. And people describe seeing a light bobbing, changing colors, and seeming to be moving towards you before it disappears. And the thing I like about this is that it's a straight road. So, like, you're not...
It's not something coming around or disappearing behind a bend.
Yes. Allegedly, there were sightings of the light before the tracks were pulled up in 1934. So, while it was a functioning railroad, there were sightings of this light. And then, since then, there are still sightings. This one has various versions of a story. So one version is that it's a, quote, mystical phenomenon. This one is lazy, I think. They're like, it's just a light that appears where treasure is buried. And allegedly, an early Spanish conquistador buried a large amount of gold in the woods and never returned for it. And now someone made up a thing where a light will just appear where buried treasure is.
How far inland is this? Because,
Great
like,
question.
any pirates who bury their treasure, like, inland, they don't typically go very far. They stay fairly coastal. At least my understanding of pirates.
Listen, it's not a good...
I'm sorry, conquistadors.
It's not the best story. Another story is that in 18...
Skip was a better story.
I know, poor Skip. He was at least true. In 1865, a Confederate captain named James Kaiser set fire to part of the woods. This is true. To try and flush out locals who refused to fight for the Confederacy. Love that. According to history, I don't know why I wrote that. According to history, no one was hurt except for the forest. Because he just burned down a whole chunk of forest.
And all the poor forest critters.
Yes. So no humans were actually harmed, except for in the legend. Because according to the legend, the light is a ghost of a man who was shot during the fire.
That doesn't make any sense.
I would say burned is the ghost of a man on fire.
Right? That's what you would go for.
Much more sense. Or it's ghost fire. And it's just...
Apparently the forest was so deeply negatively emotionally impacted, like that many forest creatures died.
Yes.
That, it just left this like temporal anomaly that the forest remembers.
Yes. Another version is that a crew of Mexican men were hired to help lay the old tracks of the railroad during the turn of the century. And their foreman killed all of them so that he didn't have to pay them, and he kept their wages for himself. And he disposed of all the bodies in the woods, and the light is their spirits wandering around their old work site.
Looking for their paycheck.
Yeah, probably looking for their paycheck. Another version...
Not impressed with that one.
No. Another version is that a man sold everything he owned and went to work for the railroad. He became a very dedicated railroad employee, but when business for the rails slowed down, he lost his job and was left with no other prospects, and he died shortly after losing his job. And now his spirit walks around the site of his former job carrying a lantern.
But, I mean...
God help me if my ghost shows up
dedication,
at my work.
I guess. I mean, they said he was a very dedicated rail employee.
Yeah.
So I guess in death, he's like, well, I want to go back to work.
The only reason I would go back to work as a ghost would be to, like, harass my coworkers and just be annoying. Another version is that a hunter got lost in the woods many years ago, and that the light is his spirit carrying a flame, just looking for a way out of the forest.
That one, that's my favorite so far, I guess.
Okay. My advice to him would be just follow the road. It's it's just 8 miles of straight road. And then the last version is that a railroad worker was decapitated in a train accident and his head was never recovered.
I wonder, what is the actual number of decapitations for train accidents?
I was just thinking that, and I don't want to know because
like I know there's a lot of fatalities with train incidents, and that's not even counting like actual train crashes or derailments or what have you. I'm just talking like the straight, like one person versus a train kind of a thing.
I recently saw a episode of Unsolved Mysteries that was a girl who her official cause of death was like suicide by stepping in front of a train, but they think that she had been killed before that and then was placed on the tracks. But it was incredibly disturbing because when you get hit by a train, your whole body becomes dismembered. Like,
you just basically explode.
Yeah.
That kind of impact, you just...
Yeah, you're not staying in one piece. And I'm already like really...
And then if you get like under the train,
no.
you turn into hamburger.
Yeah. And I'm already like really freaked out by like the idea that you could get decapitated in like a car accident, because I know that happens too. And my brain immediately starts thinking of like how that happens, and then decapitations.
I remember in Driver's Ed hearing a story about a woman who had been partially or like all but like she was nearly headless Nick.
Oh no.
Like almost completely decapitated because of her seatbelt. So she was basically like sitting to the side, like I guess facing the driver or something. So the seatbelt was kind of up, and they got into an accident and it just sliced right through her.
Oh my gosh.
Well, not right through, but mostly through.
Mostly. Nearly through. Nearly all the way through.
Nearly headless.
If you want to feel a little better, by the way, go look up crash tests, like comparisons. Our Subarus are fantastic.
Oh yeah, we're good to go.
It'll just tell you every car that you don't want to be in, because some of them do just like crumple up like a little can. Man, I've never felt so good about owning about the car that I own, because Subarus are just like
the best.
You're fine.
So trains are both terrifying. Like to think about just the horror stories that we've talked about tonight, the real ones that I have witnessed or nearly witnessed. Like if I had gotten home an hour earlier, I would have been there like for the screaming and the sirens.
Oh gosh, I forgot about that one.
Like I would have heard it. Like that's because it was right there. But it's like, as terrifying as they are, there's still
they're cool.
There's this romanticism to them. Like there's the idea of like just jumping on a train and riding off into the sunset. There's something about like you see a train tracks and you just like, I just want to walk down the middle of those tracks. Like, it's just trees on either side. It's a long stretch of tracks. You just want to walk the tracks.
Yep.
Like there's just a weird romantic side of trains, and there's like a weird pull to it that both I think everyone's a little bit afraid of trains.
Yeah.
Everyone's a little bit in love with trains.
Yeah.
And everyone is definitely a lot pissed off with trains.
Yeah. Trains
Get out of my way.
Yeah, they elicit a lot of emotions. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they can piss you off real easy. If you think about them too hard, they can freak you out.
Or they can put you in a nice, like, a dreamy kind of, you know, just daydream about trains.
Some of my favorite, like, not memories, but when I was in college and I didn't have a car for a semester because I crashed mine. I didn't crash it. There was an accident. Anyways, to get home from Winston-Salem.
Good thing you didn't lose your head over it.
I did, but that's another story. To get home, I would take a bus from Winston-Salem to High Point, and it would take you directly to the High Point train station.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in like 2009. So train tickets, I mean, I could get a train ticket from High Point, North Carolina to Cary, which is where my parents would pick me up, for like $13 with my AAA discount. And you just hop on that train, you hope for a free seat where no one else is, you put a movie on your laptop, or you do some homework, and you
just good to go.
You just hang out for an hour or two, and then you're home.
I rode a train from Clemson, South Carolina to New Orleans.
Oof.
It was supposed to be a 12-hour train ride, and I think it ended up being closer. It was definitely over 14 hours. I think it was closer to 15, because I remember we were almost to New Orleans. I was tired. I was just over being on the train at that point. And I remember we were so close. It was nighttime. Like, I'd gotten up super early, and now it was dark. And I was just ready to be back home.
Yeah.
And I remember I could see the city. Like, we were almost there. And then we stopped because some jackweasel had put some, like, boards across the track or something.
Jeez.
Yeah, so basically there's just, like, some obstruction on the track that, you know, if the train had hit it, you know, it could have caused problems for the train. Like, it could have caused an accident, a derailment, whatever. But also it was like why are they here? Is there an issue further along the tracks that we don't know about yet? Like, is this the signalman? So
it's crazy how they got that signal to the train without a lantern.
Yeah. We were stopped, and I could see the city. I was like, oh my gosh, we were almost there, and we were stopped for like half an hour, and I was just like, I am miserable and in agony. And I think I had to pee, and it was one of those, like, I was probably around 16 or 17, I think.
Yeah.
And I was by myself. And so, like, I didn't know, like, I didn't feel comfortable leaving my stuff in the seat to go to the bathroom or go explore. I think I did a little bit here and there, like, short trips. You know, I took my essentials with me. But, oh, yeah, it was miserable. It was both really fun in the beginning.
Yeah. And,
like, throughout most of the day, just, like, listening to my music and watching the world pass by.
And then you're over
But then by the end, I was over it.
Well, there aren't a lot of great explanations for the Saratoga light. The best one I saw was that it was lights from headlights. I tried to zoom in on Google. I did a lot of Google mapping. There are a few small roads that intersect it. So I was like, maybe it's like a car coming down there. So I don't know. People have also said, oh, it's swamp gases. Like, that's what train lights are. There do not appear to be any bodies of stagnant water nearby. I could be wrong. But also, tell me if I'm wrong on this. Those lights don't just, like, travel from the swamp to, like, the middle of the... Okay. I think this one is, like, legit. I want to go and look for it, because something about ghost lights, I'm like, they're kind of harmless. Like,
oh, yeah.
They're fun to look for. There could be explanations for them, but, like, they're also harmless. It's not like you're saying Bloody Mary in the mirror and some lady's going to show up behind you. So just, if anyone wants to look into further nearly identical stories, there's the Gurdon Light, which is in Gurdon, Arkansas, I think is what I wrote. There's the Cohogue Lights, which are in King William County, Virginia. And then there's Early Station in Ahoskie, North Carolina. And like I said, if anyone has their own local train light story,
we want to know.
We want to hear about it. I also, I cannot say this enough. I really want to go do this, Katie. I want to find one. I don't believe that our stupid train has a fun legend, but
next time Walker and I are out there watching the trains and we see one of the train workers, I'll ask.
Okay, please do, because
I'll ask if they have any good train light / ghost stories.
Okay, because I want to know.
Because I bet they would.
Yeah.
So if you do have any of these stories, the way you can send them to us, because please send them to us, you can always reach out via our Facebook or Instagram. Just search The Tales We Tell podcast. Or if you don't do the social media, you can check out our website, thetaleswetellpodcast.com. There's a contact us. We also have an email. It's thetaleswetellpodcast.com@gmail. No. So, hold on. thetaleswetellpodcast@gmail.com. There we go. Sorry. I'm changing up my spiel a little bit.
I know. I noticed. It was a good segue, though.
I do what I can. This is why you pay me the big bucks.
It is.
And if you want to support us and want to get some sweet swag, check out our Redbubble store. Just search The Tales We Tell. We've got several different logos, and you can put that shit on anything. Yep. And if you want to support us but don't need the stuff except early access, commercial-free listening, sometimes some fun bonus content, hopefully some fun movie reviews coming soon. Stickers, love notes occasionally. You can become patrons at patreon.com. Search The Tales We Tell. Yep. And until next week,
that's
what we got.
That's all I got.
That's our show, folks.
I did promise Katie next week's episode. I said no one died, but there are some deaths in the story. But the main story, the main content, which I feel like you're going to disagree with me when we get to it.
Well, you said no one died in this episode, and Skip would beg to differ.
The very first thing I said was, and then he got decapitated. Yeah. No. I was going to say no real people.
One real person.
2, because Charles Baldwin also died.
Yes, he did die.
2 real people died. But no children.
Nope.
And that's all I can promise. Is that no children.
The best we can do.
No children. But yeah, so we'll see everyone next week. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, it's Hannah. I wanted to quickly ask, if you are enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It goes a long way in getting the show in front of other listeners. If you listen on a platform that doesn't do reviews, please follow us on social media, like the show, or leave a comment. Thank you. We love you guys, and we hope you enjoy the show.